Well, it's the battle for black and gold as the Colorado Buffaloes head to Orlando to take the UCF Knights in one of the biggest games to date. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I am your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. Just before we get started, we were recording this on Tuesday. There is a hurricane coming. We're not going to be mentioning the weather too much in this episode, but whenever there's a hurricane, this is now our 3rd season doing this. I think we've had a hurricane come almost every single year. It's not a UCF season without a hurricane, so I hope everybody is safe. This is airing on Thursday, so I hope everybody is safe and secured wherever you are in the country, whether it's near Tampa where Nick's at, in the Cone, whatever. I hope everybody is safe and doing good. But let's talk this game, Nick. Nick, how you doing? I haven't been more hyped for a game. I'll be honest. It's Tuesday. Last night, couldn't go to sleep. I was up pretty late, just getting as much Colorado content as I could because it's a big game week.
It is a big game week. This is what college football's about. And it's funny because you look at the schedule and it's not like you're playing a ranked team or something like that, but it's I was almost about to say the face of college football, and I guess you could debate that, but one of the faces of college football, Deion Sanders, it's one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and Sheduer Sanders, and maybe the best player in college football, and Travis Hunter, and the rest of the Colorado Buffs coming to town. And with Big Noon being here, I know there was a lot of excitement around that. I saw we're on Tuesday recording this, obviously, so they're already having it set up there on Memory Mall. So we'll see if it rivals the atmosphere. I was at that college game day in the pit back in 2018. So that was a lot of fun. And I hope it rivals that experience because that was fun as hell then. So that's going to be big. It's some exposure for the program. I think we all know that Colorado is a big reason why this game is on Big Noon. Let's just be honest. But nonetheless, excited that UCF gets some exposure in the national eye. And it's a big football game, at least from a home standpoint. We got New Hampshire out of the way. We got Sam Houston State out of the way. And now we welcome some conference opponents, and you couldn't ask for a bigger one to start out with.
Yeah, to have Big Noon come to Orlando is huge. Like you said, the Colorado factor is real. I think if UCF were to lose to TCU, that this would not be the case. I don't think Big Noon would be coming. I think the fact that it is an undefeated UCF team that a lot of people are buzzing about, and we'll talk about it, because I think some UCF fans that think we don't get flowers, but I think more people in college football are starting to come around on the Knights. But at the end of the day, if Colorado loses, a lot had to happen for this to happen, Nick. I mean, if Colorado, I don't want to call it luck, right? You have to make the plays you have to make, and a lot of stuff has to go your way, and you have to be on your P's and Q's. But Colorado loses that game, Big Noon is not coming to cover UCF Colorado. So talk about the exposure, because that was brought up. I was at the weekly press conference, and you saw what it did for UCF for College Game Day. And we're going to get to Colorado in a second and all that Colorado brings, because there's a lot to get to with them. But how big is it for UCF to get Big Noon and just they're really in week 5 in their 4th game?
Yeah, it means a lot. They're the only Florida school, I believe, to get Big Noon. I mean, the other 3 schools are never in the running for Big Noon, obviously, because they're not like on that conference Fox association. But it's still big nonetheless. And just, the whole thing encompassing together, like you have what might be, you might know this, a record amount of recruits on campus for this football game. I think I saw UCF recruiting said that they've already sold out. They sold out their recruiting section completely. Like there's no more seats or tickets to go around for that. So it definitely just has that big game feel. And I don't feel like we've had this like, don't get me wrong, UCF has had some really, solid seasons over the last few years in the AAC, but I don't think that we've had a home game with this sort of hype probably in the last 6 years. Is that fair to say? Going back to that 2018 season, probably that college game day game and the USF game, probably the year after, maybe. Like, I think it's the Stanford game comes to mind in 2019 during the day. Outside of that, I feel like this is the biggest home game that UCF has played in that time frame.
Yeah, it's been a while. I can only think of a couple off the top of my head. I would say Cincy in 22 rivals it. The game me and you went to. Cincy was ranked at the time. We were trying to. It was Gus's second year, and you were just wanting to get a ranked win, and they got that. Cincy, obviously, in college game day. I think that's what rivals this with the way that it's
probably
been.
The USF game the year prior, obviously.
Yep. Yeah, so no, I think Colorado is a big reason why Colorado is hyped, and I call them they're the hype team. Like, we'll go through some of the stats, and you would think that they're better. I'm not going to sit here and bury the lead. You would think that with how much Colorado is hyped up, they would be a better football team. I mean, but at the end of the day,
give them credit. They are 3-1.
They're 3-1.
They found ways.
Exactly, and they have a team that can beat anybody on any given Saturday, just like any college football team. But there's some playmakers that we're going to get to. But let's talk Colorado. You mentioned it. A bunch of recruits coming to this game. I think I was talking to Stephen Lender. I think it's over 300 or something. And then quality recruits, it's, I think, numbers about over 70. So there's a lot on the line here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's a lot on the line for UCF. We'll talk about the spread and our picks at the end. Right now, as we were recording this, the spread is 15 on Tuesday, September 24th. It got up to as high as 15.5. I don't know where that spread is now, but let's get into it. Colorado's 3-1, beat Baylor last week on a Dave Aranda has some serious answers that he needs to answer because basically just gave up the game. Victory cigar did not work for the Baylor Bears. They have lost to Nebraska. That was a really bad game for the Buffs. Obviously, head coach Deion Sanders. You know all these names. It's not like we're going to give you an encyclopedia on Deion Sanders, Sheduer Sanders, or Travis Hunter. But Nick, kind of give your overall thoughts on this first 4 games for the Buffs. Hasn't been perfect, but at the end of the day, like you said, they're 3-1, and they've come out on top in some games that maybe they've looked a little sloppy, but they still got the win.
Yeah, it's funny. We watched that first game of the season. They played North Dakota State, and we were keeping our eye on that in the press box. And that was sort of seen as a trap game, in week 1, with a bit of a sticky opponent to have to play in your first game. And my takeaway after watching that game was, okay, Colorado looks like they're the same exact team as they were last year. And then I watched them play against Nebraska, and my takeaway was, okay, Colorado might be worse than they were last year. They get the big win over Colorado State, but I think Colorado State I think they're awful as a football team, personally. But that was a rivalry game that was very close the year prior, and their defense was lights out there. And against Baylor, even though they were trailing in that game late, you saw sort of the resolve that they showed late, and the whole big-time players make big-time plays in big games. I mean, there's no bigger player in the country than Travis Hunter. And that's why, last week we were doing, our confidence meter for the game. And I think I said I was at a 9 for this Colorado game. I'm going to be honest. I may drop that just a little bit. I'm still on the side that UCF wins the football game. But that Baylor game was just another reminder that when you have, and I know that there's a lot of players on the teams, obviously, and it's more than just 2 people, but when those 2 players, Sheduer Sanders and Travis Hunter in particular, are that outstanding, any game they play, like you said, they've got a shot to be in it. They just do. You can have your questions about the rest of what Colorado has outside of, a handful of players, and we'll get into some of those impact guys here soon. But those two guys, they give you a chance. And especially the way Travis Hunter can impact the game on both sides of the ball. I mean, he makes the incredible catch there against Baylor on the last drive, which I still don't know how he had the concentration. I mean, the body movement, all of it, the juggling it to make that catch to set up the Hail Mary to LeJontay Webster. And then in overtime to knock the ball out right at the goal line. I mean, the guy is probably number one in most people's Heisman rankings right now. So, like, I can't overstate enough what a player he is. So, definitely going to be the thing. I don't think UCF's going to be able to stop him. I don't think you stop players like that. You just have to somehow manage it a little bit and make sure nobody else beats you.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize for Colorado fans that are watching this, we do not pick. We have no idea what our score prediction is. Me and Nick talked through it. As if you're a UCF fan, you know this, but we talked through it, and at the end, we kind of figure it out. So I think coming into the week, me and Nick were really confident, and I think me and Nick are probably at the same spot right now. I think we're confident, but there are some things we need to talk through and really analyze, because I think the national media and Vegas almost assumes that that UCF is the more dominant team. They're going to run all over Colorado. Colorado's offense won't be able to play against a better UCF defense than Baylor, that we're assuming, and that this is going to be a blowout. I think me and Nick, without going through it, and we are going to, strongly don't feel that this is going to be one of those type of blowout games. But who knows? I mean, we'll talk through it. Let's start with the offense. Because I think it starts with Sheduer Sanders. We don't really need to go too in depth. I mean, they're over 1,300 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's been sacked 15 times. And on the stat sheet, he's ran 35 times, but I think it's for like 10 yards or something, Nick, because he's getting sacked. He's gotten sacked 15 times. He can pick up plays with his legs. If he wasn't sacked so many times, he would be their leading rusher because they do not run the ball well. But I think Nick, in my estimation, right now, he's a top 3 quarterback in the country. I'm not going to say number 1 because I think there have been some guys that maybe have played up to par or maybe even a little better. But if you give Sheduer Sanders time like you gave Josh Hoover, Nick, that's where it starts to be the fear of, okay, he can carve us up and it's going to be a close game.
Yeah, you have to worry about that for sure. The one thing I did find interesting when I go back and watch more of the tape on Sheduer Sanders, if he has a flaw, I think he holds on to the ball entirely too long. I think that shows up all over his tape, and I think that's a reason why you see the sack numbers the way how lopsided they are. Now, Colorado's got to be better up front. I think if anybody watches those games, that's pretty clear. I will say I think you're starting to see continued improvement from Jordan Seaton, the 5-star left tackle, who's having to be thrown right into the fire as a true freshman. Think he's starting to come into his own a little bit.
Still very raw.
Still very raw, but nonetheless, that's going to be a challenge for it might be probably going to be Nigel Leak, maybe. I would probably say it's going to be matched up against him most of that game, but I'm sure Malachi and some of the other guys will mix in as well. But that's one of the things I see when I look at Sheduer Sanders. But yes, if you do give him time and he gets the ball out quickly, I mean, he'll slice you open. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And the one advantage I think Colorado does have over UCF in this football game, not only just at quarterback, because he is a superior quarterback to KJ Jefferson, is from a skill player standpoint, RJ Harvey aside, and Kobe Hudson, let's give him his due. There's all these numbers out there where he ranks like in the top 5 in like every metric at the moment. So he's having an outstanding season. But the collective unit that Colorado puts out there between Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn Jr., and LeJontay Webster is as good as any outside of a few programs in the country, probably. So I do think those are 2 spots where they have the advantage. And the matchup there is interesting because the UCF pass defense, which you were on, obviously, after the second game of the season, it didn't exactly play too well against TCU.
No.
In fact, from Pro Football Focus's standpoint, and I know PFF's not the end-all, be-all, but it's a metric to go off of. In terms of pass coverage grade, they sort of plummeted all the way to like 76, I think. from a coverage grade based off that one game against TCU where Josh Hoover, for the majority of that game, had his way with them. So it's definitely a little bit of a mismatch there from that point. But, Colorado also struggles to run the football. I think we know that. That's, I think, what's really holding them back. And for as prolific as Sheduer is and Travis Hunter and all those dudes at wideout, this is still an offense that doesn't really score as much as you think. They, in fact, the only team now, the Big 12 is chaos. They're back to being the chaos conference. So a lot of teams are putting up points, but Colorado still is only ahead of Houston, rather, in the conference in terms of points per game, which is a little surprising when you think about that because there's 16 teams in this conference and Colorado's 15 in points per game. But they are 3-1. They have found ways to get it done, but just some things to keep an eye on.
Listen, Nick, you know me. I have team ranks. I have some answers for those questions later on. Because, yeah, you look at the points they score and you're like, okay, if it wasn't for a Hail Mary at the end and having to go to overtime, they were only putting up 24 against Baylor, and they scored their most against Baylor with 38, put up 28 against Colorado State, which, I guess credit to Colorado State. The defense played pretty well, but still, I mean, Nebraska, they put up 10, played better in the second half. So there are some question marks with Colorado. And you talked about the receivers. I will say, though, Sheduer Sanders, one thing I did notice in the Baylor game, and a lot of Baylor people brought it up, and I rewatched some of his film, not as efficient on the short and intermediate routes. If you watch him throw 10 yards or less, a little inefficient. The way that he was throwing it as the last couple weeks. So I'd be on the lookout for that. I don't think it's going to be as similar to Josh Hoover. Like we know, Colorado likes big plays. They like 20 yards or more down the field. Their receivers are big play guys. But I would definitely look out for that because I think that could play into UCF's benefit when it comes to Sheduer Sanders, where he's trying to get the ball out quick. He holds on to it too long, though, a lot of the times, like you said. So when he does get it out quick, maybe his mechanics aren't as fine-tuned as we would like to see. Again, incredible quarterback. He will carve UCF up if they don't get to him. Let's talk about those wide receivers, though. You talked about it. Skill position-wise, one of the best groups in the country. No question. You have Travis Hunter, which I'm intrigued to see. Travis Hunter, he plays the entire game. We know that. Gus talked about it, how it's incredible. He's never seen anything like it. I'm intrigued to see how he'll do having to play the snap count this week specifically, given how fast UCF's offense is. I wonder how Colorado's offense is going to, play. They don't usually do a lot of up-tempo, but that's going to be a lot of snaps on him. He has 37 receptions for 472 yards and 5 touchdowns this year. You talked about Webster. He has 4 touchdowns on the year. So out of Sheduer's 11 touchdowns, he's thrown 9 to Travis Hunter and LeJontay Webster. So talk about the receiving core. They want to pass the ball. We'll get to the running game in a second. They want to pass the ball. They want to get it out to their guys. They don't feel confident in the run game. And you can't feel that confident coming off of a TCU game where it kind of is similar. I don't think talent-wise it's all that, similar. They're close in talent, but not quite. A 3-headed monster receiver where you have to worry about where they are at all times, and hopefully Sheduer Sanders doesn't have the time to throw to these guys.
Yeah, and you could throw Will Sheppard in there too. He's made plays when he's needed to as well. So it's basically a 4-receiver offense. There's nobody else that has more than 5 catches on this team. They really don't use a tight end whatsoever. I think they have 4 combined catches between both of their tight ends. But Travis Hunter has 37 catches in 4 games. I mean, who needs the tight end at that point? Like, that's the crazy part is they got 4 dudes that they primarily use, and Travis Hunter is still getting the volume unlike any other receiver right now in college football. And you mentioned it, the fact that how many plays he plays, I think like he's played almost like 100, I think it's like 180 something plays, maybe more than the next player, like in all of college football. Like you might have to marvel at it, the conditioning on this dude. I mean, they run him into the ground, but you don't really see any effect from it. You really don't. And when I look at just zeroing in on the big 3 and Hunter, Webster, and Horn, they all can get vertical and deep and stuff like that and make plays. Great body control, obviously, from Travis Hunter. And Sheduer does a really good job, and this is what's going to put him, I think, probably, near the top of NFL draft boards, is he makes a lot of NFL throws. It's littered all over his tape, and he throws guys open. I mean, that's one of the big takeaways I see is, he'll have a guy open, but he'll sort of make them even more open, if that makes sense. And even when they're not a little open, he'll make that throw. So it's just a very prolific combination throwing to these guys, and they all can beat you. It can be any of their day on any given game. And so that's what is going to make this very, very challenging for Ted Roof. And I'm sure, obviously, he's hard at work trying to figure out. He's had 2 weeks to figure this out. And like I said, I don't think you're stopping Travis Hunter. I just don't think you're doing it. And I don't think UCF has a guy that you can just assign to him all game long and say, hey, go do your thing. That's not going to happen. So I think they're going to have to get creative, do what they can. But like I said, if Travis Hunter beats you, you got to somehow make sure that Webster and Horn don't do it as well.
Yeah, and they definitely rotate guys. I mean, Omarion Miller got his first game against Baylor last week. He's dangerous. He's a deep ball threat. You mentioned Will Shepherd. What's interesting is, we know Jimmy Horn, USF. He's played UCF a couple times in his career. And I looked at it. I think he had 55 yards in one game, 50 yards in the second. LeJohntay Webster has played UCF. He was on FAU in 22 when you have the John Rice Plumlee leaping touchdown the week after that Louisville loss, and he had 5 receptions for 17 yards and a touchdown. So
yeah,
Gus Malzahn has seen some of these guys.
And also just real quick to point out Jimmy Horn. He did do most. He got most of his production in the North Dakota State game. He had 198 yards in that one, and in the 3 games since, he's been held under 100 yards total. So they haven't gotten him the ball probably at the rate they'd want to. But again, part of that goes into the fact that Travis Hunter is just taking up all the targets right now.
I don't even know how many targets Travis Hunter has, but he's got 37 receptions, and the next closest is Horn with 18. So I don't think if you're UCF, I don't think doubling. I understand the thought of, let's double him, but I think you're putting yourself in a bad position with the other skill position players. At the end of the day, Colorado doesn't mind if you double Travis Hunter. If you double Travis Hunter, that's going to get another guy open. So I think if you're UCF, you have to go one-on-one. I'd put Brandon Adams on him, tall, lengthy guy on another tall, lengthy guy, and hope for the best. I mean, at the end of the day, he's going to go over 100 yards most likely.
Is hope a strategy?
It's not, but with those type of players, you have to do what you can to contain them. You can't, at the end of the day, you're not going to hold Travis Hunter. You don't have a corner. I think Brandon Adams is a really talented corner. I think he's an NFL type of corner. I don't think he can hold him to under 100. Now, granted, maybe that's what you're saying, hey, Brandon, go try and lock this guy up. I think it would be a bad move to double cover him. So I think when you look at all the other guys, Jimmy Horn can beat you deep. LeJohntay Webster can beat you deep. Will Shepherd is a dog. So you have guys that can beat you. And that's why you have to play it similar to TCU, where it's, man on man. If you want to switch to zone, you can.
And it is sort of a similar look because I guess as we transition to the run game for Colorado, we knew that TCU wasn't really going to present much of a threat on the ground in that football game. Now, TCU was still able to get by and put up a lot of points, especially in that first half, without having much of a running game. And Colorado's got they don't have any resemblance of a running game. I think they're averaging 68 yards on the ground, 2.5 yards per carry as a team in 4 games. I mean, man, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. That's probably, I said why Colorado doesn't score as many points as they probably should. I mean, they're just completely one-dimensional. Mm-hmm. And that's putting a lot of stress on your offensive line when you cannot run the football, and you're putting a lot into the hands of Sheduer Sanders. And obviously he's risen to the occasion because he is that good. But they have about 4 backs that they have tried to get in there. I mean, Dallas Hayden was the guy that we thought was going to potentially be the answer, and he sits here today, 3.7 yards per average. Not one of these running backs is over for 100 yards on the season. Like they just haven't been able to find a guy yet.
Well, and I will say, and we can get to the run game. The run game is not going to be too much of a talking point because it is not great. Dallin Hayden got hurt in the Nebraska game. I think it was a high ankle sprain or something. He will be back for this game, so he will be playing against UCF. Was from Ohio State, came to Colorado, hasn't done much, didn't do much in the first 2 games, 14 carries for 52 yards. So he is dynamic. I think he's definitely the most dynamic running back on their roster, so it'll be good to get him back. They have the Michael Welch kid who has performed well, but at the end of the day, most of his yards came from the Colorado State game, and he's a freshman, so it's like, what can you take away from that? They have the Isaiah Augustave kid who has 78 yards. He got most of his yards kind of split between Baylor and Colorado State. So you mentioned it. They are, I have the team ranks, 129th in rushing offense. For context, TCU is 121st. Because I thought they are similar. I'm not going to lie to you. Like TCU and Colorado are very similar teams in the way they play, the way they're constructed. Colorado doesn't have much of a run game. And the fact that they are worse than TCU should tell you everything you need to know. That's why I said, and this is looking forward, but Cincinnati could be a little bit of a challenge for the Knights because in the next couple of weeks, you're playing teams that don't have a great run game.
Right.
And you're going into this week where you know what Colorado's going to want to do. They're going to want to throw the football all over you. So if you stick to your run blocks and you stop them from running the football, they're going to want to throw it all over the yard.
Yeah.
And if you stop that, you win. Which is easier said than done.
Right. And that's why, like, I don't even know, and this is obviously more of a discussion for later when they play some teams that do want to run the ball. But, like, I don't know if UCF has a good run defense. I don't really know. Like, I know the numbers tell me that they're top 10 in the nation, but
we don't know.
I truly still don't know that, and I don't think I'm going to know this week. Now, I'll know if somehow Colorado finds their running game against UCF, I suppose we'll have the answer then. But I don't really foresee that happening because it's just not their recipe. But, yeah, we truly don't know the answer to that question.
And let's call it like it is. You have a bunch of Florida boys coming back to Florida, 2 receivers, 1 quarterback. They're going to want to show out. They're going to want to show out being back home. So, no, I frankly don't think there's going to be much difference of a running game. But who knows? Maybe their goal is we need to limit time of possession as much as humanly possible, and the way we do that is by running the football. That's the recipe to beat teams like UCF is having better time of possession. And that is one of the things I wanted to bring up before we go into the defense, because you mentioned, wow, Colorado hasn't put up a lot of points. What's that about? Why aren't they scoring? They are definitely inefficient at times. Their time of possession rank, which usually I don't look at time of possession, because time of possession is so... It depends on the game, depends on score, all that good stuff.
There's context to it.
There is context. But Colorado's time of possession is 95th in the country. UCF is 26th. Now, what that means is they could be having a lot of 3 and outs. I mean, their third down conversion's 45th, so maybe it's not as bad as we think. But what that tells me is Colorado's not scoring as much because they're not as efficient on offense as we would think. They're not scoring a lot of points because maybe they're getting off the field quicker than they need to be.
Yeah, I was going to point that out. What I found that sort of goes hand in hand with what you're saying is in terms of tempo. Like we've been watching UCF for the last decade or so, and they've always been one of the more faster teams moving on offense. It's a little bit different this year. UCF's actually about average across FBS competition right now in terms of tempo and how fast they're moving offensively, whereas Colorado moves in the top 20 in terms of tempo. And if you have stuff like 3 and outs and stuff like that, I mean, obviously that gives the opposing offenses more opportunity, and that can get Colorado in trouble at times.
Yeah, hopefully, like, listen, if you get Colorado into third and manageables, I mean, the problem that they've run into, which I've noticed for a couple of their games, is if you get them in a 4th and 1, you could probably stop them because they try to run the football and they don't get the 1 yard. Or you get them in 3rd and 2s, they don't get the 2 yards. With UCF, it's just different. You can get them in a 3rd and 4, and the likelihood you pick it up is really high because of their run game. So it'll be interesting. The Colorado offense is the chance that Colorado has to beat UCF. This Colorado offense is dangerous. If this defense plays like they did against TCU, it might be a long night of a lot of sweating. But let's go to the defense, because I think the defense, Nick, is, how do I put this? The defense is better than people are making them out to be, but also still not good. I think the strong suit, I think that's, a nice way to put it. Their corners are really good. I mean, I think me and you, we'll go through some of the players. Their secondary is really good. UCF knows a couple of the players on defense. There's some intertwining with some of the Colorado defense. But what have you seen from this defense? Very similar to UCF in terms of maybe the pressure that the defensive line has. They have 5 sacks. UCF has 1, but not as good of pressure as you would like out of the defense. And then we'll get into the run defense, but that's, I think, why the line for this game is so heavily in UCF's favor, because Colorado, at least on the outside, looks like they are really not that great at stopping the run.
No, they are not great at stopping the run. They have given up 150 yards per game on the ground so far this season. They just have been a disaster, quite frankly. But to give them credit, and I shouldn't say been a disaster. They were a disaster early in the season. We still are earlier in the season, but you know what I mean. The last 2 games, I should say, I think their defense it goes back actually to the Nebraska game. And that was, I listened to Deion after that game, and, he tried to pull some positives and from that situation. And it was, hey, our defense in the second half really stood tall and was able to find something there. And it translated over to Colorado State. At times, I saw it translate over to Baylor. But to your point, while there is improvement there, it's still not the level that they want it to be at. I think it's better than it was last year. I think there's no doubt about that whatsoever. But overall, I mean, I don't see a front that gets as much pressure. 5 sacks in 4 games. That might actually be more than UCF has, to be honest with you.
UCF has 1 sack.
Yeah, UCF has 1 sack.
In 3 games.
But they do at least get pressure. I don't see, there's not really a guy, I think, that Colorado, I think Deion Hayes has 2 sacks for them.
He's their leader,
Yeah, he's their leader in sack. Linebacker Levante Bentley has 1. And then defensive lineman Shane Cokes has 1 as well. But like you said, I think the secondary, some of the guys back there, obviously we know Travis Hunter, Cameron Silman Craig is their leading tackler, the safety. DJ McKinney is another guy that you have to look out for, who leads them in pass defenses. So it's definitely a more talented group in their back end. I mean, they're only averaging giving up 208 yards against the pass. So they've been relatively stingy in that department. So it is a much more improved team defensively than it was last year, but it's still sort of middle of the road when it comes to Big 12. And we know that UCF has the number 1 rush offense in football. And I mean, RJ said it yesterday, like, hey, we know we're going to run the ball. They know we're going to run the ball. So we're going to line up and play.
Yeah. Deion had his press conference today. Obviously, you guys are watching this on Thursday or Friday, so it was a couple days ago. But I tweeted out, I watched it live, and I thought it was interesting. The first question to Deion was about the run game, because, again, UCF is number 1 in the country. And Deion's response was, load the box up and pray. That was his response. So it's not like we can sit on here and talk, what are they going to do to stop the run? Are they going to load the box? Are they going to play it? Colorado plays man. Colorado is a man defense. They don't switch out. They're going to load up the box. And that's what most teams are going to do.
I'll break it down very easily like this. Sort of how I said that UCF is not necessarily going to stop Travis Hunter. Colorado is not going to stop RJ Harvey. It's just not going to happen. And I have to think Deion knows that. Like,
he's hoping. He's praying, Nick.
He's praying, obviously. But I've been very, very, beyond just RJ Harvey. I mean, sometimes, he's a talented ass back, and he's played with last year, the offensive line was not great at times, and he still was able to get his yardage. But the offensive line, the push that they're getting, man, working as a collective unit, I've been so impressed with that unit through the first 3 games of the season. And I think they have a chance to maybe dominate at that part of the game. And like I said, I always look at those matchups in the trenches. Those matchups in the trenches in big games always, to me, end up deciding the winner and loser I think UCF has the big advantage there in this game. I don't think they're going to be able to stop RJ Harvey. I think he's going to get a full load in this game. I think it's going to be similar to TCU where you don't see as much rotation with the other three backs. I think this is going to be all RJ Harvey because, quite frankly, between RJ Harvey and Kobe Hudson, I think there's a significant drop-off in the amount of guys that you can say, hey, let's go out there and make plays. Like, against really good competition. So I think it's going to be a big RJ Harvey show in this one.
Yeah, it's done a complete 180 in terms of what we were talking about last year where we were saying, the trenches UCF is lacking. Every team we play, they're bigger, they're stronger. This is the biggest difference from Group of 5 to Power 4.
Yep.
This year, you're not getting that conversation. When you're hearing people talk about the UCF O-line and D-line, they have a really good O-line that, Colorado doesn't match up well against. And it's good to hear, and it's good that it's the same 5 guys. There's been no injuries. They are, I think, the unsung heroes of this season to date because they are playing incredible. You mentioned, the defensive line and struggling, and I will give Colorado's defense credit because I watched some of their run defense against Baylor. They do play hard. I'll give Colorado that. Their defense plays tough and hard. Like, they are running to the ball. And I think for UCF, I don't want to say there's going to be a shock because they're going to be ready for this game and everybody's going to get up for it. But you just might think by the way that people talk that Colorado's just, they have a terrible, run block defense and UCF's going to run all over them. I think UCF's going to get punched in the mouth a little bit early. I think they're going to do everything they can to stop RJ Harvey, which is going to open some KJ passes downfield. If he completes them or not, that's a big question. Like, can a guy other than Kobe Hudson make some catches? And I think my prediction is Randy Pittman is going to have a huge game. I think this is the Randy Pittman game that I say he goes over 70 yards. And that's just based off of what we saw kind of at the end of the TCU game to where I think what they're going to do now is they're going to put Travis Hunter on Kobe probably the entire game, depending on where they match up. And you're going to have guys that need to make some plays.
Yeah, and I did want to go back real quick because I failed to mention him, and that's an oversight on my part because I think he actually is the impact player on this Colorado defense, and that's Nikhai Hill-Green, the Charlotte transfer at linebacker. He was at Michigan before that. This dude's a baller. I think this is actually, I know Travis Hunter, has outstanding moments at corner. I think he's a better receiver than he is corner, though. Mm-hmm. This is the guy that you circle on this Colorado defense. And in terms of what they can do to stop the run, I mean, he's doing everything he can. Against Baylor, he had a 90 in elite run defense grade, according to PFF. 12 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 5 run stops. He was a beast against Baylor. So that dude can play. Again, I'm a little unsure of the guys around him, but I did want to shout him out because I did sort of gloss right over him, even though I think he is the impact player on this defense.
Well, I was going to go back to him because obviously, if you remember, Nick, he was originally committed to come here this season.
Right.
Ended up not coming here for a multitude of reasons. Number one, wasn't promised a starting linebacker job because we were bringing in as many linebackers as we possibly
he'd be starting on this one right now, I'll tell you that. Not to say the linebackers haven't been improved, but Nikhai Hill-Green, I think, would easily be starting on this team.
No, he's done really good, and Colorado fans are letting UCF fans know because they say to look at the PFF grades of their linebackers because I guess they're 15th in the country on run defense. So
I do. I got the numbers. I had the numbers right in front of me.
You should say because Colorado fans will love you for saying that because we've been that's all we've been hearing about for the last week.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they have the number 15 rush grade in the entire country. Yes, defensively.
But we also want to make sure to remind everybody that PFF
and they also, for what it's worth, they're number 2 in tackling too.
So again, stats don't tell you the whole thing. Eye test. And listen, they haven't allowed over 200 yards on the ground in any game. I think that definitely changes this game. UCF is not going to divert from what they do. One thing I do want to mention, though, quarterback runs, Nick. I think the QB run game has been really what has hurt Colorado in many of these games. I think if you listen to any Colorado, person that covers the team, they say they always mention it. I think it's weird. I've listened to like 2 or 3 different podcasts this week just trying to get ready. They say, "Oh, we're worried about KJ Jefferson. Like we're worried about the QB draws,
running the football."
Yeah, they say that like and you can see it if you watch the games. You kind of notice Colorado does have a problem with when the quarterback pulls.
Yeah, I mean Sawyer Robertson kind of gashed them a few times last week.
Well, and I forgot. I don't know who the quarterback is for North Dakota State, but he did really well too.
Fowler Nicolsi.
Yeah, so he did really good too. So I think, I think some of the On3 guys said that this is a defense that KJ Jefferson was born to play against, and I think you are going to see a lot of. I think you see probably, I'd say you had 9, I think, against TCU, Nick, or something like that. I think you go over that. I think UCF knows on tape that they can. I'm not saying he's going to go run for an 80-yard touchdown, but to keep Colorado honest, I do think you see that. Another person that we did see last season was DJ McKinney, which he was on Oklahoma State. I went back and watched the game, or clips of the game, because I wanted to see if he gave up any big plays. And he did give up 1 to Javon Baker. Besides that, it was mostly other guys. So I think that is definitely something to watch. There are a lot of, that's what I'm saying, there's a lot of, not similarities, but a lot of crossing paths with some of these players in the new age of the transfer portal on both sides of the football that have played UCF has played. So it's a benefit to both teams, but I think being at home, being in the environment, I think it helps UCF knowing some of these guys.
I mean McKinney too. He did not have the greatest game against against Baylor. Rather, I think he allowed 2 touchdowns in that football game. So not a great showing for him. But I do think that there's probably better in him. And like I said, you predicted Randy Pittman to have a big game today, and I think we've sort of been waiting for that. And I told you at the beginning of the year, I think who's going to be the second leading receiver on this team, I said Randy Pittman, because you've seen a guy like Xavier Townsend, I think we know is a great sort of gadget piece, but really didn't get him involved at all against TCU. I think against some of these bigger teams that UCF plays, I just haven't been able to get him involved. Not to say he's not a talented player. I think clearly he is, and maybe they'll continue to put an emphasis on that. But yeah, I do think right now Kobe Hudson is so head and shoulders ahead of everybody else on this offense. You have to wonder how that factors in, because as much as UCF is going to be zeroing in on Travis Hunter, Colorado is going to be right there with Kobe Hudson, because again, you could probably on one hand tell you how many receivers have better than Kobe Hudson this year.
Yeah, it's not many. Kobe's been incredible. Townsend needs to step up, especially, and give him opportunities this game, because there's going to be a chance he's open. They do have a really good secondary, but if you need to throw the ball, which I know UCF does not want to have to throw the ball, they're going to want to run it down their throat the entire game. But
I do think this is another game. Like I've been saying, I've been waiting for what's the game where UCF is eventually going to have to open it up, and we're going to have to see KJ really push it down the field. And I mean, we'll see how game's scripted. Obviously, I don't think it's this game. I still think they're gonna live and die by what they can do on the ground.
I think that might be next week. I think next week might be the game where you kind of might see KJ open it up a little bit more. But they had to open it up against TCU. They had to pass the ball down the field a little bit more being down, and it looked good there. I just do not think this is the week to do it. I think you stay away from Travis Hunter. Unfortunately, Kobe might not get many targets this week, but you don't want to give Colorado an opportunity by throwing it to their best player. Yeah. I mean, Kobe is our best receiver, but you don't want to give them even the slightest opportunity to get an extra possession, potentially.
And we know that Randy as well, because he's really come on as a really good blocker, kind of being used as that sort of 6th offensive lineman for a large part of that game against TCU, to be honest with you. And again, if you're putting more of an emphasis, continuing an emphasis rather, to run the football, I think that's obviously going to hold Randy Pittman back a little bit. And like we've been saying here, I don't really know. I know Xavier on the wide receiver depth chart is the 2, but I don't really know if that's the case. It's Kobe and it's everybody else.
Yeah. As long as the other guys can make a play here or there, I think UCF, again, for the fourth time under Gus is one of the best offenses in the country. Nobody really wants to face the UCF offense because of how dynamic it is and how much you have to be disciplined. This kind of leads us into our predictions, but I think for a team like Colorado, if you look at penalties, fewest penalties, I think UCF has been way more disciplined this year than they are last year. They're 15th in the country in fewest penalties. Colorado's 103rd. They've had 30 penalties in 4 games. So I think when you talk about the emphasis on staying on your P's and Q's, especially on the defensive side of the football, playing UCF, you have to be disciplined. And that's going to be the big question.
And both teams, by the way, just to mention it, both teams are nightmares on special teams. So
bad. Yeah, bad. The only positive, or I guess not positive, their kicker, they're not actual field goal kicker. I know that's not their field goal kicker, but Feely, who's their kickoff guy, is out. So I don't know. I was listening to Deion today. I don't know if they have a guy that gets into the end zone, but if they don't, that's going to be an opportunity for Townsend to make some noise in special teams this week. Baylor had a kick return touchdown. I would assume that if they don't have a guy that can punt it in the end zone, X is going to have a field day. But all right, I think that's enough. Nick, I'm going to let you start. You let me go first last time. I'll let you go first this time. The spread on BetOnline, like we said, is 15. I think it's 15. I will double and triple check, but 15 points. Kind of go into your spiel.
Let's get crazy. I told you, I think the Chaos Conference is back, the Big 12. We saw some just madness this past weekend. You never know what's going to happen. BYU blowing out Kansas State at home. You know, the Baylor-Colorado ending. All that being said, I do have UCF winning this football game. I think this is going to be a classic Big 12 shootout to an extent. I'm going with UCF 37, and I'm going Colorado 31. So I think 15.5 is, I mean, the odds makers clearly are respecting UCF a lot. And I'm not saying I don't believe in UCF. I don't know if I believe in them at 15.5 against Colorado. I don't know. So I'm going to go, I think it's going to be a close game. I think both teams put up points, a lot of yardage, so 37-31.
Yeah, the line is at 15 right now. Don't know where that'll be by the end of the week.
That's outrageous.
I'll be honest. I didn't think it would. I can't remember the last time UCF was favored by that many points. Like, obviously, let me rephrase. I can't remember the last time UCF was favored by that many points against a Power 4 opponent. Let alone, like, obviously you have the first 2 games, UCF was favored by a lot. But 2 touchdowns against Colorado seems like a lot, especially for, I think if you watched UCF, I don't think the TCU game instilled confidence that this defense is going to be able to hold a team like Colorado, down.
I just know 12's going to be making plays. I just know it.
Oh, he's going to
be keeping them in that game.
Yeah, and I think maybe this was naive of me, but throughout the entire week, I'm like 14, like 2 touchdowns for me seems like a solid line. Like 14, do I think UCF covers? No, but I could totally see the final score being 42-28. I still think UCF puts up a 42. I think they're going to be able to run the ball really effectively. And I think they'll be able to score on Colorado. I don't think Colorado has seen an offense like this year. No offense to Nebraska, but I think they're 2 totally different offenses. They are run 2 totally different things. I think the Colorado defense has the ability to make stops, but I think UCF wins this game 42-31. I'm going to say an 11-point win. So 1 extra touchdown than you. We'll see. This is a weird game. It's just like the TCU game where you're like very similar teams. I think with Colorado, you look at it and you say UCF, I think, is the better team. They're viewed as the better team by basically everybody looking at this game. But I think the reason we're looking at it as it's definitely not a 15-point swing in our eyes is because you don't know how the defense is going to respond, Nick. You don't know if the defense is going to be able to get pressure. We're assuming, This is a really good defensive line that should be able to get pressure on Sheduer. But the question is, are the guys going to step up to the plate, or are they going to have another TCU? Because if it's another TCU, just like you said, it's going to be one of those Big 12 heart attack games where you don't know who's going to win at the end. All right. With that being said, we'll see. We'll see what happens. That means we both have it. I guess if you were to make a bet, we both would take Colorado, not to win, but you take the points. Who knows though? I'll take a UCF blowout. There's I saw a couple scores today, Nick, that was like 42-25 UCF, and I'm like,
yeah. Well, I will say, like there is more people on the national side that, like I said, sort of really believe in this UCF team, and I mean, I suppose if you're a UCF fan, you've been sort of waiting for that acknowledgement. Mm-hmm. It's not lost on me that that the performance against TCU was far from perfect. I mean, they won the game by 1 point, where you had to overcome a 21-point deficit. And as you saw this past weekend, and listen, I don't do the whole transitive property garbage, because I think football is so based on matchups. It's week to week. I mean, so I think it's just nonsense to do that. But for what it's worth, you saw TCU, laid an egg right after UCF. And I don't think that means that wasn't a quality win. I don't think it does. I don't think it means that. But I just am saying straight up, that was a 1 point victory that required a 21-point deficit. And there were some pretty alarming things for at least 2 quarters and some change. So, it's still a flawed team, is my point.
Yep. A win would give a Knights a 4-0 start to the season for the first time since 2018. It would give Gus Malzahn a 4-0 start to the season for the third time in his career, the first since 2019, and the first time as the Knights head coach. Would give UCF a win in its Big 12 home conference opener for the first time in program history, given it's only their second year. Would give UCF a 2-0 start to Big 12 play and a 3-0 record at home this season. That would be a big stat. If UCF goes out and wins only the third time or fourth time in Gus Malzahn's career to start a season 4-0, I think that would be looking at a very special season for the Knights. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Charge On. As always, please like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. We greatly appreciate it. Put down in the comments section below, what do you think the score is going to be? All you Colorado fans, let us know why UCF is going to lose this game. We will be doing our pregame and postgame show. As always, Stephen Leonard will join us for our postgame show. So make sure, like I said, subscribe, turn on post notifications. We'll be going live. Game's at 3:30, so we'll be going live at 2 p.m. Don't know where yet. Again, it's always going to be a new location for us. We're going basically any new place around the stadium, we're going to go. So we'll tell you where we're at. And if you want to come say hi, come say hi. I think me and Nick are going to go try and do the big noon kickoff. I think we're going to go try and do that. See what it's about. So maybe see you guys.
Let you know
there.
how I feel in the morning.
Yeah, that's why I said we might be there. I might be there. It's up to Nick at that point. Nick has to drive here.
I mean, to be fair, I'll probably even if I get there on time, I'll look at it for a few minutes and then I'll go on about my day. Probably.
Well, my goal is to go hand out some of our business cards to a bunch of drunk UCF fans.
You do business and I'll just observe.
All right, guys, big time game. Let us know what you think. Stressful, but hey, these are the games you live for as a UCF Knights fan.
You could be playing what do you call it? I'm trying to name some random AA school right now. AAC school
Charlotte.
Right now. They're not coming to mind. No, the ones that UCF actually used to play. I almost used Tulsa, but that's a bad example to use.
Tulane.
Tulane's actually solid.
I said Charlotte.
UCF wasn't playing Charlotte in the American. I'm trying to
Temple.
Yeah, you could be playing Temple right now. You could be prepping yourself up to play Temple at noon.
Yeah, so this is much better and a lot more fun. All right, everybody. This has been Charge On, presented by Bet Online. We will see you for the pregame show, postgame show, and after the game.